Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Purdue, and I am the infrastructure nerd. Not just an infrastructure nerd, but the infrastructure nerd. If you don't believe me, go to www.theinfrastructurenerd.com and see whose picture shows up there. Today we are talking about reporting capabilities in Tabs3 and PracticeMaster and the accounting software. And what we're really looking at is advanced capabilities, things that go beyond the scope of what you can do or what you already know how to do within the software. Now, before I get started, a little bit of preamble. I guess we call it housekeeping. This is what your control panel looks like for GoToWebinar. If you've already gotten rid of this big box, you did it by pressing this little button here that looks like an arrow pointing to the right. That slides the big box out of the way, which you may have to do in order to see all of my screen. Once you do that, this little arrow pointing to the right icon turns into a little arrow pointing to the left icon, and then clicking it when it's in that state will slide this box back out so that you can see it. Two reasons you'd want to have interaction with this box. One is that you can, and you can see this button even when it's closed. This is the raise my hand button. Clever, isn't it? It's a hand with an arrow in front of it pointing upward. That's how you raise your hand. If you do that at some point where she can interrupt me, our humble and modest moderator, Leanne, will interrupt me, unmute you so that you can ask your question, make sure you get your question answered, and then mute you back up again so that you can go on doing whatever it is you're doing. Maybe you're eating something crunchy. If you are shy, instead you will type a question here. Leanne will do the same thing, only you won't be talking live. So, now, without any further ado, let's take a look at tabs. I'm going to take you into the report menu here. And I'm going to show you what we already have, and I'm going to do that with the transaction file list. And by that I mean, and if you're familiar with tabs, you're familiar with this concept, there are lots of reports built into tabs: accounts payable, general ledger, trust accounting. There are some predefined reports in PracticeMaster that are a little different than what I'm showing you here. And of those dozens of reports, there are literally hundreds of ways to print them. You can print them for a specific client, or for all clients, or perhaps for a range of clients that really is just all that matters for that client. You can do it for a specific primary or secondary originating timekeeper. You can do it by a specific working timekeeper or a date range for fees or certain transaction codes or categories. You can show or not show certain things here in this transaction file list. There are a bunch of things you can show and not show simply by checking or unchecking a box. There are different ways and places to pull your data from. There are different ways to sort them. Now, I'm not going to go through all that. We could be here for days. What I'm pointing out to you is the very first thing to do when you're looking at information that you think you can't get from tabs or AP or GL or trust is to look and see if that's really true. Sometimes that means calling Mary Jo or me or somebody else, maybe STI's support department, and saying, this is what I want, this is where I'm looking for it, this is what I'm doing, is there a way that I'm not seeing to get this information? Because as I say, there are a lot of different conglomerations to how you can print these reports. Now, on the other side of the coin here, if we get out of tabs, go into PracticeMaster, I'm going to go into one of the custom reports. PracticeMaster has a custom report writer built into it, free of charge. You don't have to pay extra for this. And this is a good time to mention that there are report writers for tabs and general ledger that cost extra and have to be bought as an additional module. I do not recommend them. They're very old. They're antiquated. They're not as flexible as or powerful as some of the methods I'm going to teach you. And if you're going to get into doing custom reporting, I think they're better tools. Enough said. Now, I'm going to pull up just very quickly a client summary report in PracticeMaster to show you that you have the ability in PracticeMaster to pull all sorts of information together into one report. Here we see information coming from the client, opportunities, people, journal. These are all files within our copy of PracticeMaster. You can define your own fields. You can ask questions when the report is run. You can filter by a variety of circumstances, and you can organize your report a lot of different ways. Now again, I'm not going to show you how to do this. I'm kind of showing you what your options are. Very, very powerful stuff. The PracticeMaster report writer is very powerful. It is a little clunky and antiquated, just like the Tabs3 and General Ledger report writer, but it's free, it's there, and well, we can do some pretty amazing things with it. A lot of times other resellers will call us and ask us to help them do some pretty amazing things with it. And we have some clients that have some very nerdy people, and I can say that because I'm a nerd, but some very nerdy people on their staffs who are capable of doing some very cool things with the PracticeMaster report writer. The problem is PracticeMaster's report writer can only report on things that are in PracticeMaster. Now, if your need, for instance, has to do with fees, if you go to the client screen, you know that you can look at fees, or you can see them in the Matter Manager, you can see them in the client screen. That and costs, mainly advances and expenses, and of course, as you know, if you're using PracticeMaster, those things are only WIP unless you've got the special switch set to pull over your archive transactions into PracticeMaster. Those are the only tabs-related things you can access. You cannot access the ledger records, the history of billing, the history of payments, how things were applied, receipts, and how they were allocated. You can't access anything from GL or AP or Trust. Okay? Now, what we're really here today to talk about is going beyond that. And so I'm going to start with a definition of the ODBC driver. ODBC as in Open Database Connectivity. This is a separate $99 package that you purchase from STI. It is supposed to be purchased one per workstation, but that doesn't mean that if you have a 70 workstation install of Tabs3 and PracticeMaster that you need 70 copies of the ODBC driver. That just means that you are supposed to be buying it individually for each workstation that is going to need it. Now, in a 70-station install, you might have 30 or 40 attorneys, and they probably have absolutely no need for the ODBC driver, as do the secretaries, or should I say, as do not the secretaries. It probably is your billing people, your accounting people that are going to be using this. So that is one alternative, is the ODBC driver, and that's necessary to get at this data. Now, those of you that know about Platinum, which is just a step up in the hierarchy of the Tabs3 PracticeMaster products, might know that there's also something called Platinum SQL. And if you've ever seen these letters, maybe you've wondered what they mean and how they're pronounced, but they're SQL, and that is pronounced SQL. The Platinum SQL level includes ODBC functionality for all workstations, so you do not need to buy ODBC drivers at all if you're using Platinum SQL. Now, one thing to be aware of, the ODBC drivers can be slow. I'm going to show you some examples that are already pre-formatted, already run, with names changed to protect the innocent. And I'm going to show you a couple of reports actually running in ODBC, but they're going to be pulling from files that don't have much data. We're going to look at a listing of the checks that we printed on a certain day. And that check file in our system, we don't write a lot of checks, and we've been using the software for many years, but you know, it's not a big deal. In a firm that is 30, 40, 20, 15 attorneys that's been using Tabs for a long time and has lots of archived fee entries, certain types of queries are going to take a long time. So one thing to know is that if you're thinking of doing this and you already have, or even if you don't already have the Platinum version, you may consider upgrading to the Platinum SQL version, because that is, among other things, among not having to buy the ODBC drivers for everybody's desktop, is going to let you run these reports 30, 35, 40, 45 times faster than they would run with just the standard ODBC drivers. Okay? Now, that's enough about that. Open Database Connectivity drivers, ODBC drivers, basically install on the workstation, even if you're running Platinum SQL, and allow any ODBC compliant package to access all the data that's in the system. Basically what it does is it opens up the data in a read-only format. You can't write to the data files, but in a read-only format allows programs like Excel, Access, Crystal Reports, or any of the other report writers, or even custom programs, which we'll look at in a second, to access that data and do anything they want with it. Anything they want with it. Okay. Now, one thing to remember, if I pull up this report or any of the other pre-programmed or reports that I've already written, whichever, in PracticeMaster and going to modify it, I am starting with that report and merely changing it. Okay? If you say, I don't quite get the information in receipt allocation organized the way I want it, maybe you need it, and we'll look at this again, maybe you need it by a certain originating timekeeper broken down showing who did the work underneath them, yada, yada, yada. You are not, when you work with the ODBC drivers, you are not pulling up a report and changing it. You are starting from scratch. In other words, you are looking at raw data in raw data structures, and you are hooking things together and making them come out. Now, if I'm frightening some people, that's probably good, because this is not for the faint of heart. But keep in mind, we can do this for you. You may have somebody on your staff that can do this, depending on what your needs are. Many of our clients have people that are capable of, at least in a simple form, writing some quick access type of ODBC queries that will pull out certain bits of information for reference. Now, let's take a look at how that works. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here and out of here. And I'm going to go into, just Excel. And I'm going to show you that once the ODBC drivers are installed, any program like Excel or Access or a custom program can access them, the data. And all you do, and just to show you how that works, is we go in and we open up a connection to the data. Here's my connection to the STI data. And what that means then is that we can open up these files. Here's the accounts payable invoice file. Here are all the fields that are in it. Let's say I want to pull up the invoice date, the due date, and the amount. We're not going to pull in the payer because, or payee, because I'm kind of just flying by the seat of my pants, and I don't want you to see anything you're probably not supposed to see. And we can return that here. And here is a list of every invoice that's in my accounts payable system showing the due date, the invoice date, and the amount. You sometimes get weird stuff like this, but when they're formatted by the program that you're using, Excel, Access, whatever, they come out looking like dollar amounts. And when I get out of here, it says, well, where do you want to put that in Excel? And I'm pointing right here, and I say OK, and it goes out, and there they are. That's ODBC connectivity in its simplest form. Now I'm going to close this up, and I'm going to open another spreadsheet that I have out on my desktop. And this is my sample spreadsheet. This is a quick report that I wrote this morning. Actually, I'm working on this for a client. I have a client that has a need to do what we call positive pay. They have had trouble with fraud with their bank account, so they need to provide to their bank on a daily basis every check that was written, which is, we call it positive pay, the banks do, I should say, and it just means that you're saying, yes, these checks when they come through were written by us and they really should be cashed because we wrote them. That's what positive pay means. And so this is kind of an extension of what I was doing for a client this morning. This is a very simple report. We've got basically, this is our data region here. These are some date ranges that I've been able to program. And this is a heading. I am in Excel. I can do anything with this data that I want to once I get it in here. And I can even put simple variables in here that allow me to say, well, you know, what's the beginning and ending date of what I'm looking for? Maybe I want 1/3 through 1/4. Bam, there it is. Maybe I just want 1/4 through 1/4. Well, let's say 1/5. Bam, there it is, okay? That is a very simple report to pull in some accounts payable data and operate on it. Now, we have a lot of clients that are using these sorts of things to look at ledger information on a client-by-client basis that maybe they can't see in exactly the same way that they want it to. Maybe it's not organized the same way. Maybe they just want to pull it into Excel and then manipulate the numbers from there. Maybe they have a simple report like this that they want to present to the partners every day or every week to show this data in a format that's congruent with what the partners are looking at or wanting to look at. I'm not going to get into specifics about how I did this because we have a very limited amount of time, and I want to show you what all your options are. Another ability that we have, and this is more from this point forward, what I'm going to show you is kind of programming related. Again, you can do it yourself if you have a programmer who can do this. We have several subcontractors that we work with to produce these reports, but you can do it too. It's just a matter of having the ODBC drivers and having the expertise. If you don't have the expertise, we have it. But this type of report is usually where our clients' internal abilities stop unless they have a really sharp IT person that understands programming. Now, we can take a report like this. This report simply pulls out raw data, the fields we want, organizes it the way we want. We might change these headings to not be field names and be a little more, easy to look at. But this report just pulls out raw data and presents it. We can have what we call an enhanced simple spreadsheet. And I don't have an example of this, but it might take some data, massage it in a certain way using programming code. We call it VB code, which stands for Visual Basic. And then after it's massaged it, present it in a certain way. Maybe you want to pull in some data from PracticeMaster into a report that lists client balances. So we not only want to know the client number and the client name and maybe the work description and the amount that they owe, but we also want to know what area of practice they fall into, if it's a litigation matter, what their cause number is, or their claim number, or things like that. That's an example of a simple report that doesn't require a custom program, doesn't require Microsoft Access, but probably has a little more programming than the common man can do. Okay? Now, let's move on. I'm going to take you to a report that is actually written in Access. It's actually a series of reports. And what I'm going to do, since I've kind of pulled some of these things from client sites, is I'm going to show you what the screen looks like, but I'm not actually taking you into the program because I don't want you to see the client's name or any confidential information. So here we have a situation where there are several reports that would be run. In this example, we have a client productivity, a timekeeper productivity, a certain special originator report that has 2 originators, which anybody that's used Tabs knows we only have space for 1 originator. So for this client, we've written a report that allows 2 originators with 2 sets of percentages. This matter was originated by Bob, and he gets 60% of receipts, and George, and he gets 40% of receipts. So in this interface, what happens is you simply go into Access, or you run this report. You don't know you're going into Access. You select from the drop-down, and we can't see the list, but you select the report you want. You enter the beginning and ending date, and you click on Run Report. And what you end up with is something that looks perhaps like this. This is an example of the client productivity report. Now, keep in mind, I have taken a lot of data out. I've changed all the names. And so obviously, these 3 matters worth of data does not equal $11.3 million. This was a very large report for, I believe, half of a year. And what it does is it shows clients who did the work and how many hours were billed, what that amount was, what the rate was, how those break down percentage-wise, and gives totals. So this is one example of a report organized exactly the way the client wanted to see it, with the information coming out of the ODBC drivers and into Excel. Through Access, I should point out, because as I said, we're going into an Access menu, choosing that report, putting the beginning and ending dates in, and running the report, and this is what we're ending up with on our screen. Now, another report that I've got to show you would be this one. Oops. This is a timekeeper productivity report that shows by timekeeper and then by client how much time was spent, hours, amount billed, not spent, but billed, and how those percentages break down. I think Leanne's going to interrupt me because I'm clairvoyant and I know these things. Leanne, are you going to interrupt me?
Yes, Paul. I have a question from Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to know in Tabs, she can only pull an AR report as of today. Does this mean you can create an AR report that can be pulled for a prior point in time?
It's a good question, and it is true. If you know enough about how the data is structured, you can basically go to the ledger file and pick a point in time and only look at the ledger file records from that date back. And theoretically, your balance due at that point is from that point in time. Now, there's a lot to that, but it can be done. We've done it for several clients. So to summarize, we want an AR report, but we don't want it as of today. We want it as of February 1st or January 1st. Yes, we can do that. Now here's another report. This is the one that I mentioned that has the duplicate dual originators. So in this report we show for each timekeeper how much work they originated as originator 1 and how much work they originated as originator 2, which is much less frequent, who did the work, and then how much that totaled. Now this is what I like to call the eat what you kill report. If you're an associate, you should be eating what you kill. You should be bringing in work and doing it. If you're a partner or a rainmaker, if you will, you should be killing and letting other people eat, as this person is obviously doing. He brought in $2.1 million worth of work in that time period, and he only did $408,000 worth of that work. The rest was done by other people. And this is an example of being able to, I call it throwing it up in the air and having it fall down in a different conglomeration. We have this information. We have access to it. It's just not something that Tabs is designed to produce or has been written to produce. And so we are simply going in and saying, hey, let's kind of reorganize that and do it the way we want to. And that's what this is doing. Now, one more thing that I want to show you is an actual custom program. I think I had mentioned that I was going to show you, so I'm going to show you. This is for a firm that has a certain type of referral that comes in. And when they do that type of referral work, they really, really want to track it because it's a new arrangement to them. They're very interested in the business they're generating through this arrangement, and so they want to know whether or not it's profitable, and they want to be able to look at things in a variety of different ways. And so this was the very first of what we call a living report. This is a report that when run, and I have just simulated running it. It's at a firm that does not have Platinum SQL, so it does take about 30 minutes to actually run on their system. And so I've simulated running it, and what it does is it shows all the receipts that were received for any matters during that period that were referred by that special type of referrer, breaks them down by who did the work, who the primary timekeeper is, who the client is, who the referrer is, both by person and by firm, and then lets them play with the numbers. For instance, if they say, well, I'd like to see everything broken down by who the referrer was, so I just drag that up there, and then underneath that I'd like to see who did the work. So I just drag that up underneath. Oops, I have to drag it underneath. There we go. And now what we end up is a report that shows all the different work that people referred and who did the work. And if we look over here, if we were to scrunch this stuff down a little bit, it's designed to be run on a bigger screen. Here are the actual amounts for those people. Now, this is our front end to this. This is our custom report engine, our custom report program for this particular report, but it also has the ability to create a spreadsheet. It's just a button you hit right up here. It says Export to Excel. And what that does is it pushes that out. I have to find it here. There you go. To a spreadsheet in Excel. I think that was telling me something that I should have paid attention to. Hold on one second. Yes. to a spreadsheet in Excel, and we'll scrunch these down a little just so you can kind of see all along. And this is what I mean when I say it's a living report. Keep in mind these names have all been changed. This isn't the Bank of Nigeria. Who would ever go to the Bank of Nigeria? Aren't they the people that are always sending the spam? And then allows us to see for the different filters we apply. Well, let's see how much work we got from the party box. Bam, $22,000 worth of receipts. Okay, well, let's clear that filter. And these are all filters that are designed. This is the filtering feature within Excel. We didn't do anything to make this happen. Now let's look not at that, but how much work has been brought in from this refer that Richard M. Foosball Jr., Richard R. Foosball Jr. is working on. $4,720 worth of receipts have come in. And this is how much worked and worked amount and billed amount. So this is what's been billed, this is what's been collected, and this is what's still standing out there waiting to be billed. But by designing this report in this way, we have a situation where we can say, let's apply these filters. And then as the data changes, let's see how much of the work was done by Cynthia. Bam. She has brought in, from her work alone, $5,255 for this type of client. That is a living report. And by living, I mean we go ahead and we run the report, but then the report doesn't just get printed and stay there on the paper. It goes into a spreadsheet where the people that are needing to look at this data from a variety of different perspectives can do that. Okay? That is what I have to say about reporting. Now I'm going to summarize real quickly. We have the reports that are available in Tabs3 and PracticeMaster. They are pretty static, although there are a lot of different ways to present them and print them. Sometimes that alone can be confusing. We have the ability to add on this thing called ODBC Connectivity, either with the ODBC driver, which is slow and cheap, or by upgrading to Platinum SQL, which is fast and a little bit more expensive. Once we do that, keeping in mind that we have to start from scratch, we're not just pulling up a report and saying, I'd like to move this column here. If we want to move that column there, we basically have to redesign the report from scratch. We then have the ability to do the very simple spreadsheets like the one that I showed you that lists checks that were written on certain days, to do enhanced simple spreadsheets which may be simple in nature and less expensive in nature, but do have some calculation going on in the background once the data is pulled in. Maybe organized a different way, maybe presented in a way where it pulls two things together and then does some analysis before it presents them. We have the ability to have very full-featured, programmatically driven reports with a front end in Access or whatever language we end up using that basically provide us with spreadsheet-type reports that we can then print or distribute electronically, and we have the ability to write custom programs and even create things like the living report that I just showed you, where the information, once pulled in, massaged, rearranged, is then presented in a way where it can be filtered and sorted in different scenarios so that people can actually work with it and see things from different perspectives. Do we have any more questions, Leanne?
No more questions.
Okay, that either means that everybody's asleep or that I've done a very good job explaining. So I'm going to go with the latter. Is the latter what I just said, or is that, oh yeah, I'm going to go with the latter and assume that I did a very good job of explaining.